and today I'm going to be looking at what is the best type of black pencil that you can use to go over the top of pastel work. Now, I've been doing a number of botanical studies and paintings that involves a lot of black line art over the top of block colour, and because of that I thought it would be great to show you the journey I've been on, to show you the best kind of pencils, specifically black in this case, that is good for going over the top of pencil. Now, for those of you that are doing a lot of animal work, animal realistic kind of paintings, a lot of artists are currently using Pan Pastel as a base, which is this one here, and that's because Pan is a great pastel for doing really a lot of base colours, and then because it is so fine on the paper, it allows you to do a lot of layers over the top, which is great for pencil if you're doing fine details like fur. On the other side here, I've got Nu Pastel. Now, Nu Pastel is quite hard pastel, not as hard as Conte, but close. And it also makes a really great base if you want to do block colours, because that allows you to put a lot of softer pastels layered over the top. So we have our Pan and we have our Nu. Our 6 pencils in this case that we're going to try, bit of a trick thing there because one of them isn't a pencil. We have our Carbofellow, which is a great all-rounder, great for doing kind of coloured pencil work as well as general pastel work. It's not officially a pastel pencil, but it has a soft enough core that actually it works really well as a pastel pencil, certainly for doing details on top of pastel, and that's the Stabilio. Then I have the classics. I have 2 Pit pencils, Pit Pastel, which is a good stability for a lot of pastel paintings and things. A lot of people use those, that's great. And I also have Pit Oil Base pastel pencils. Now, these are slightly different. I haven't seen these before, so I thought I would try one and see what it is. Those of you that are sharp-eyed already can already see the difference. You can see that there's a difference straight onto the pastel paper. Then on top of that, I've got a classic Derwent. Derwent has been around a long time. If I would say it's kind of, and I mean no offence to Derwent, but it is very much a kind of student grade pastel, and it's great for beginners if you're trying to get into it. It can be very, very gritty, which is the only thing. And also because it's so soft, it does tend to break an awful lot when you're sharpening it. However, it is also good for layering down some nice thick lines as well. Then on top of this, we also have Conte. Conte is obviously a really hard pastel. I brought this into the mix because this was suggested by a friend, because specifically I'm looking to make sure that I get a really nice dark black on top of my pastel, and this was suggested. Now, I've used Conte sticks, so I'm used to using Conte for when I need to do some details, and if you break a piece of Conte stick, and they're the very, very thin, long rectangular sticks, you can get some really nice sharp lines with them when you're doing detail work, especially great for doing things like whiskers and stuff. So I'm hopeful that their pencil will give it a good run for money and maybe replace having to break my Contes on a regular basis. The final offering I am going to use is a uni pen. Now, these are water and fade proof pigment ink pens. It has a brush type nib that looks like a normal nib, but the end is feathered slightly so that it gives more of a brush stroke. I tend to find that pens do not work on pastel because the nib picks up the particles and pigment off the paper, and therefore it dries the tip out and then it stops working. However, if the pen is wet enough, it can give some really nice black lines onto paper, and with more brush nibs coming out onto the market from a lot of pens, this may be a way to go in the future without actually having to damage your pastels or damage your nib in the same process. So what I'm going to look at, now I've dropped one of them pencils already, is we're going to see how these all these pencils kind of go over the top of what we've got on the board for our pan and our Nu pastel. Starting with the Carbofello. I have to dig that out of my hand. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a straight line pressed fairly hard, a thin line pressed not so hard, and a squiggly line to see whether or not it smudges into the pastel, whether or not it picks up the pastel off the paper, and therefore it loses its dark tone and hue. And what else it kind of does in regards to the kind of layering as well. So here we go, let's try the Carbofello. So you have to excuse the jumper, it's my husband, so it's huge. So pressing quite hard gives a nice line. Just bear in mind that I am not straight whatsoever. Faint line. And then wiggly line. Now I'm going to clean the nib, and we will do the same on the Nu pastel. So hard line, soft line, wiggly line. Now, as expected, kind of see the Carbofello's a nice soft core pencil, so it is picking up the grain. You can see it in the wiggly line, and in the softer line it is picking up the grain of the paper underneath, which is fine. I would prefer it not to, but as a soft line, as a hard line, it's doing very, very well on both. Okay, so the next one is our Derwent. Now, Derwent is very, very soft, so I would not be surprised if the lead snapped. But hopefully, as this is a brand new pencil and it was well packaged, then we should be fine. So we will do our hard line, soft line, and wiggly line. And you can see, or at least I hope you can see, it's picked up quite a bit of the pastel off the paper. I'm just going to clean the nib before we do the Nu pastel, right? Onto the Nu pastel. So, hard line, soft line, wiggly line. Now what I will say, apart from the fact that it's picking up a ton of the pastel, is that you can see a lot more of the texture of the paper through the Derwent. So it's obviously not layering down as well as the Carbofello, because it's not getting into all the grooves and bits and pieces of the paper texture. So we're now going to do our Pip pastel pencil. This is one I've used for a very, very long time for a lot of my wildlife paintings, and I have used them for a long time, but I'm interested to see what this is going to be like against the oil. I mean, you can see the difference already on the paper. However, what I might do is a zoom in, because whilst the pastel pencil is picking up the texture of the paper, and therefore it's not filling every tooth, the oil pastel pencil did fill every bit of the tooth, which gave a very nice smooth line. I think it may well be better for detail, even if it looks duller. So let's have a go with the pastel pencil. So our heavy line, our lighter line, our wiggly line. And the same on to our Nu. It's not picking up as much pastel as the Derwent was. So that, Oh dear. There we go. One of the other problems with the pits is that being soft core, it tends to snap, and it has indeed broken just there. Light line, wiggly line. Okay. Right, so it doesn't pick up as much pastel as the Derwent, but it did snap. Right, now on to the one I have not tried previously, which is the Pitt Oil Base Pastel Pencil. So basically an oil pastel in a pencil. I quite like the idea of these, and I think I might see more. Definitely, it was very strange to write with because I'm not going to say it didn't have more resistance. It was almost smoother, but it almost felt like it was going down thicker. So we'll see how this comes out. So heavy line first, lighter line, wiggly line. I mean, I think you can pretty much see straight away that it is a lot paler than any of the other pencils. So we'll try that with the Nu pastels. So heavy line, light line. Does very thin lines very well. Wiggly line. Okay. Well, I think I know how I feel about that one. But I think used in the right application, that could be a very, very good pencil. Okay, so 2 to go. Conte. One of the nice hard pastels around. Is good for details. Sticks are very thin, so it's a very expensive pastel. You don't get a lot of buck for your bang, really. So we're going to try hard line first. Light line. Wiggly line. And then you can see it has picked up some of the pastel off the paper, which means you would get some contamination moving from area to area. Right, hard line, light line, wiggly line. You can see it doesn't spread as much on the Nu pastels as it does on the Pan, which is interesting. Still, it picks up, because it's a hard pencil, it is picking up a lot of the pastel underneath. Now, if I was doing these lines on top of something a lot softer, like maybe some Unison, I suspect we'd probably get a lot of contamination, and that the pastel pencil would pick up a lot of the colour underneath. Okay, so this is our uni pen. I got this to do a lot of detail and fine line detail and other bits and pieces of work, specifically for going over watercolour, because it's permanent and waterproof. So we're going to see how this one goes on both the Pan and the Nu. Will the pen outperform pastel? That's a curious question. So we're going to go for hard line. And scrape all the bits of pastel off the nib. Soft line. Wiggly line. Well, if you get it going in the right direction, it will. Okay, so let's try it on the Nu pastel. Peel the nib off a wee bit. There we go. Right, so hard line. Ooh. Yes, it does not like the Nu pastel at all in any way whatsoever. Thin line, non-existent. And wiggly line. I think we can safely say that the pen picked up an awful lot of the pastel from the paper and therefore was completely ineffectual. But it does also show the difference between layering down normal pastels as a base versus pan pastel, and the difference between the two. That is not a lot of pan pastel because it goes very far because of how pigmented it is, yet I've still got a nice vibrant colour and a flat base. Same with the Nu pastel. The difference is the amount of pastel that's on the paper, and in this case the Nu pastel, there's a lot more pastel on the paper, and that's proof by the pen because it's picking a lot more of it up off the paper because there's more for it to pick up. The result being in almost no colour down at all from the pen whatsoever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you in for a closer look and then you can see. Okay, so allow the camera to focus, there we go. So you can see here, this is the Pan Pastel, the Carbonfellow and the Derwent. You can see how well they've gone on. There is a difference between the Carbonfellow and the Derwent. You can see that the Carbonfellow shows the texture of the paper a lot more. However, the Carbonfellow is a much darker black than the Derwent. So if you're looking for a really nice deep black for layering over the top of the pastels, then I would probably say the Carbonfellow is good for that. The pit and the oil, well, you can pretty much see the difference. The pit being an absolute staple for most pastel artists, but the oil, which is relatively newer, is a lot paler. It doesn't have the pigment base because of the oil in it, so it's not layering down as much pigment, so it's nowhere near as dark. However, it does retain its thinness and smoothness on the paper, and you can see that between the two, certainly more on the wiggly line than either of anything. So I think realistically, if you were looking for a lot of nice detail, and you're willing to put up with the fact that it is not as dark, you could probably get it darker by doing another layer again over the top. It'd be interesting to see how the white in that range performs, whether or not it is translucent or whether it lays down opaque, because if it lays down opaque, it would probably be a decent contender for finer details on whiskers particularly. Here we have our Conte, which also is another rich dark black, but also shows an awful lot of the texture, and our Uni pen. Then we're going to go over to the Nu pastels. Try not to get into my own shadow. There we go. Carbonfellow versus the Derwent. Again, the Carbonfellow is definitely a lot darker, but it does tend to show the texture a bit more. Coming down, we've got our pits, our oil and our pastel. You can see where the pit pastel broke, which is a common problem with those pencils, but if you know what you're doing, you can avoid it. And then at the bottom here is our Conte, which performed again really well on the Nu pastel and the Uni pen. So folks, I hope that has been really quite helpful. I hope you've managed to get a good look at both sets and got an idea for yourself of what you may or may want to use for your own works from this. I hope you've enjoyed my video today, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.